Welcome to the Inventor's Edge podcast, where insight meets innovation. Whether you're sketching your first idea or refining a finished product, you're in the right place. Our mission is to equip you with the tools, expertise, and clarity you need to succeed as an inventor, while helping you conquer fears and limiting beliefs that may be holding you back. I'm your host, Scott Putnam, founder and CEO of Inventor's Edge. Before becoming a seasoned product development coach, I was a wide-eyed inventor with a head full of ideas but no clear path forward. I know firsthand what it's like to feel stuck, uncertain, and overwhelmed. Fast forward to today, I'm a successful entrepreneur with multiple licensing deals and products on the market. I'm committed to helping inventors like you overcome obstacles, conquer fears, and transform your ideas into tangible success through proven, actionable, step-by-step strategies that deliver real results. Join us as we bring in industry pros, share expert advice, and dive deep into the world of innovation. Ready to turn your ideas into reality? Let's get started. Today's special guest is the one and only Chuck Mullins, Managing Director and Senior M&A Advisor at Quietlight, and a true pioneer in the world of online business. Chuck first built his profitable website at just 18 years old back in 1996 and has since become a serial entrepreneur, certified M&A professional, and trusted advisor to founders looking to scale and sell their businesses the smart way. Known as the Idea Guy, Chuck has helped turn underperforming websites into thriving ventures and guided dozens of successful exits. In this episode, he shares what inventors and product-based entrepreneurs need to know about valuation, growth strategy, and positioning your business as a sellable asset, even if you're just getting started. If you've ever imagined selling your company for a life-changing payday, stick around. Chuck drops some serious gems on how to plan for the end game and avoid costly mistakes many founders make. Chuck shares the keys to doing this the right way. Let's dive in. Hey, Chuck, welcome to the show. Glad to have you on.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, for our listeners who are inventors and early stage entrepreneurs, can you share a bit about your background, what you do at Quietlight, and maybe just a little history of Quietlight for people that are not familiar with your company?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. So I started my first online business. I guess I've been an entrepreneur my whole life, right? Since I was a little kid, but started my first kind of real business, online business in 96 when I graduated high school. I ramped that up to making quite a bit of money while I was in college and started trying to figure out what should I do with the money I'm making? And that led me down the path of acquiring other companies. When I first started, I was looking at, the typical stuff that I think most entrepreneurs first look at, which is like car washes and laundromats and self-storage facilities, kind of all of those things. But I realized that my expertise lied in online businesses. So I started looking to acquire other online businesses. And as part of that, I would go out and I would speak at different conferences, just trying to find businesses to acquire. And I would bring in different brokerages to speak with me. And I'd be like the buyer, they'd be the seller, and we do a little presentation. And pretty quickly, all of these different brokerages started to hire me, started to recruit me, wanted me to come work for them. And it didn't really make sense at the time. But then I had sold one of my businesses that was taking up the majority of my time. And I reached out to Quietlight and I said, hey, tell me what this might look like. And it made sense. And that was about, 8 years ago now. And, I've been helping entrepreneurs ever since sell their digital businesses. So, background on Quietlight is that Quietlight focuses on online businesses. So think of e-commerce, content, SaaS, membership, service-based businesses, kind of anything that can be remotely operated where you're not geographically bound, right? Like an example would be, I've got a friend who bought a business from us that he lived in Orlando. The business was actually physically warehouse located in Oregon. They sold online, Amazon, and on their website. But then the seller lived in the Canary Islands off the coast of Africa, right? And then 3 years later, we resold that business for him. Now, instead of being in Orlando, he lived in Puerto Rico. Again, business, still warehouse in Oregon, but this time the buyer in Australia, right? So those are the types of businesses we help people sell where it's like, it doesn't matter where you live. you could run this business kind of from anywhere. And whether that, again, that's e-commerce, content SaaS, membership, like kind of anything that fits that profile, we help people sell those businesses.
That's that's awesome. When I learned about what you do, I got really excited because as an inventor and an entrepreneur, you're always thinking about what does the finish line look like? What's the end goal here? What do I want to do with my ideas and my products? And for most of us, we have a lot of products and a lot of ideas. And I know on our first call, we talked, I got really excited. I had no idea, I assumed there were people like you out there doing this, but to actually hear your stories and how you help people and what that looks like was really exciting. And I thought, all right, I gotta get Chuck on a podcast here. So thanks for sharing your experience. I'm wondering, with your experience and knowledge in the field here, how does that really help business owners sort of navigate their journey from, let's say, taking an idea, building to selling it online, and then moving through your process?
Yeah. So, at Quietlight, we're all a bunch of serial entrepreneurs. We don't hire people that don't have direct online business ownership experience. And we feel that that gives us like a unique ability to work with other owners and understand the things they've gone through, right? One of the businesses I sold, um, the buyer, we agreed on everything, we signed all the documents, and all of a sudden the money's supposed to come and it doesn't show up. Right. And as a business owner, I start freaking out and I'm doing this on my own. I don't know what's going on. And it was just this whole mess. And all of a sudden in my head, I'm starting to think like, I'll take $100,000 less. I'll take $200,000 less. I just like, I've already checked out of the business and I couldn't imagine going back in and continuing to work on this business because I've already checked out. Right. So, half the job, or probably more than half the job I do, is almost being like a counselor for somebody and helping them walk back off of cliffs, because no transaction is ever like just like, totally smooth. There's always things that come up. And unless you understand that like these things happen and it's just the ordinary course of the process, like it can get really scary. It's just like I said, I'm constantly walking people off of cliffs and saying like, it's going to be okay. Like,
Yeah.
I've been through this personally. So like we have this like ability to like tap into our own personal experiences and help people with that, as far as that part of it. But then also like I've been there, done that with almost everything you can imagine with online businesses. So
Mhm.
like I've seen all the different stuff and I often can help people, just present their business in a way to make people understand like what they're actually looking at. And, sellers often think that they need to hide the negative things about their business. And it's the exact
Mhm.
opposite, right? When people are looking at your business, you have to show them these negatives. Every business has flaws. No business is perfect. And when you're going through the
Right.
process and you say like, hey, here's some negatives and you're upfront about it, in a buyer's mind, it's like check. They do a bunch of checks. I don't like that, but okay, I understand, check. But once you've
Mm.
actually submitted a letter of intent, an LOI, and they start doing their due diligence, they've already told you what they're going to pay you. Now, if they find a negative, it's no longer a check, it's a big red X. And they're either going to want to like lower the price or back out of the deal. So it's all of these like little things that we've learned just from our experience, both personally and doing the brokerage stuff, that we're able to help people navigate the path.
That's so interesting. Can we zoom out just a little bit to give people some context on what would be the typical journey of somebody from thinking of a product idea, going through the process, developing it, getting it on e-commerce? Can you walk us through a little bit of that? And then at what point do you come in to help people sell the business and sell the product?
Yeah. So, I mean, everybody's journey is unique. So it's hard to really say like, here's the step-by-step guide of what it is, right? As a serial entrepreneur myself, I've got millions of ideas, right? Like constantly ideas, even before we started this podcast, right? Like we were talking about some stuff. So, you know, it's not about the idea, it's about the execution of the idea. And I think that many entrepreneurs think that they come up with a great idea and like, hey, I'm going to be able to sell this idea. But for the most part, that is not the reality of what I see. Sure, there are some people who can create a patent and get some, massive company to buy it. But I think that's the one in a million and not the regular, right? So the reality from what I see is you come up with an idea, you create the product, maybe you do some market testing before you spend a lot of money in that. Make sure that there are going to be people who are interested and want to actually purchase this, right? Then you figure out like, okay, what are my sales channels going to be? Probably some of the easiest sales channels are just Amazon, right? Depends on kind of the product type. We're seeing a lot of people have success on TikTok if it's more of something that's like viral, right? Interesting versus other types of product which maybe are more boring. But I love boring businesses, right? So
Yeah.
doesn't boring not to mean they're they're not a great business, just meaning like, hey, I'm selling something that somebody needs to buy once a month, right? And it's not like a fidget spinner, right? Like being the next fidget spinner can make you a bunch of money real fast, but they don't generally have the longevity of lasting. And if we're talking about like getting to the final path of selling the business, like those generally aren't going to have very good exits, right? They may make a bunch of money up front, but you want something with a longevity. So I think again, ideation, testing, launch, creating sales, making sure that you're structuring the business in a way where you're thinking about the exit from the beginning. So
Hmm.
having clean books, making sure you're doing your accounting on accrual versus cash, really understanding your numbers, what the advertising looks like, how much money you're spending on advertising versus what you're selling the product for versus your actual unit cost, making sure that you're actually making a profit. We see that when
Hmm.
people are running their books on cash, oftentimes they have no idea that they're actually losing money on every product they sell. They think like, hey, I bought it for $5, I'm selling it for 15, I'm making a lot of money. But then you come to realize that you're spending $7 in advertising, the Amazon fees are $5, all these, your warehousing costs, fulfillment, all these other things add up, and you may actually be losing money. So making sure
Hmm.
that you really understand your numbers is really important. You've got a corporate structure, an Inc., LLC, whatever, your counsel advises you to form.
Hmm.
IP, protecting it through patents and trademarks, getting those registered if you're going through like an Amazon, making sure that you get a brand protection on Amazon so that people aren't ripping you off. Let me think of what else. Is that kind of what you were looking for there?
Yeah, that's perfect. I know we kind of dove in right to the finish line. I just wanted to paint a little bit of a picture of the journey for an inventor, getting their product manufactured, getting it on Amazon, starting some sales, and we'll get into some of the more details about when you guys come into the picture and when you get buyers excited. So essentially you're the middleman between, let's say, business owner that has a product on Amazon, for example, and the money people that are looking to buy those businesses. They're buying the product. What are they usually buying? Is it the whole business or a product line or one product, or is it all over the place?
Yeah. Generally, they're not buying the business in the sense of it's an entity. They're buying the assets of the business, right? So the vast majority of transactions are asset sales. So yeah, like
Hmm.
the majority of buyers out there are buying cash flow, right? And what makes
Hmm.
the cash flow? Product, right? And that product could be a service, it could be a physical product, whatever the product is. Um, they're buying, you know, how you're selling it, the advertising behind that, kind of the entire business that is leading to a profit. So they want from
Hmm.
A to Z, everything that's included to generate the revenue and profit that this business is generating. They just don't want the corporate shell because that just adds additional liability. They buy the assets and move those into a new entity.
Got it. Makes perfect sense. And I appreciate you talking about the reality of this and the paperwork side of it, knowing your numbers, making sure you have margin, because there are people that are selling millions of dollars of product on Amazon and other e-commerce platforms that are losing money because they really are not in touch with the books. Like you said, companies are, what they're buying is your profit. And if you're losing money, you're not going to be very attractive to
Something
a
else to think
company.
about there is oftentimes people they they think that like, oh, I want to take on money or I want to take on investors, right? And that can certainly be a good thing. But when you see these people who sell their company for $100 million, question is, how much did they actually end up with? And many a
Mhm.
time, they're ending up with say 3 million, 5 million of $100 million sale. because they've just been
Mm,
diluted so much from all of this investment they've taken on.
yeah.
A lot of people that we work with who bootstrap make 5, 10, 20 million, right? So taking on investment isn't always the most productive thing, right? I guess it depends on like what is your goal? Is your goal that like, hey, I want to share my product with the world and I want to take on this investment so that the world can see this, even though I may not make as much money? Or is it, hey, I want to like try to maximize what I'm actually going to take home at the end of the day? And that may be not taking on significant investment and more like bootstrapping companies.
Yeah, great point. That was great advice I got early on is make sure you know your numbers and make sure you're profitable. Because like you said, people will kind of bury their head in the sand and say, well, I'm getting it made for 50 cents and I'm selling it for $3. But it's what are all of your fees? Don't hide anything because the people you work with, they need to see all those numbers. And I loved what you said about it. It doesn't have to be perfect. There can be some issues with the business or with the product. Show them your business, your product, warts and all, because it's probably, I would imagine, an opportunity for them to say, hey, this person as a one-man band or a small group can't do this very well because they're not able to scale, but this is what we do.
Yeah.
Does
And when
that
we
come
talk
into
about the
play?
Yeah, I was to say when we talk about financials, sometimes you mentioned like don't hide things, but oftentimes people are hiding it from themselves. Right, like knowing your
Mhm,
numbers and knowing your expenses and stuff is not just about like the eventual sale. It's like don't just think you're making money because you have your head in the sand, right? Like know that
mhm.
you're making money. Know all of the different costs that go into the actual sale of the product you're selling.
Yeah, great point. And that's such a difference between licensing and venturing a product idea. And I've been on both sides of that, and it's such a different animal depending on what people wanna do. So, with licensing model, you're turning it over, it becomes more passive income, mailbox money. When you're talking about venturing, getting a product on Amazon, other e-commerce platforms, you're starting a business, and it's important to run it like a business, run the books like a business, so that at the end of the day, you can get a company interested in potentially buying it from you. I appreciate you pointing out the discrepancy there, and it is such a big difference. And I want to get into a little bit of your business structure and philosophy. I know at Quietlight you emphasize the four pillars of value risk, growth opportunity, transferability, and documentation. I know we've talked a bit about that, but those being crucial for maximizing your business's worth. If we drill down on that, what would you say? Which of these pillars do you find most business owners sort of underestimate or kind of struggle with, and how do you address that before, or how can they address it before going to market, would you
Yeah,
say?
so it's interesting, right? The reason there's four pillars is because they're each really, really matter.
Mhm,
But, thinking about where people often fail would probably be documentation. It's probably the number one thing. Not making sure that they have access to all their invoices in an easy way. Saving. So an example would be like Amazon. Amazon platform only saves like 2 years worth of data, but you really want like your data for the entire time you run the business. So
mhm,
making sure that you're downloading this data and storing it, that's often a problem. Risk, right? I always tell people the inverse of risk is the value, right? So the higher the risk, the lower the value, and the lower the risk, the higher the value. So making sure that you're fully appreciating what are all the risks to this business and doing things to overcome those risks, right? Like, okay, if you're manufacturing 100% of your product in China, right now that's a massive risk, right? With all of the tariffs
mhm,
and different things that are going on. So having a backup plan for that and showing that, hey, if something were to happen, I can actually move to this manufacturer that's in India or some other location. So
mhm,
I always tell people just like think about the things that keep you up at night
mhm.
and then just try to overcome those or come up with plans to mitigate those risks. And then
Yeah.
we think about growth and opportunity. I think people often think about selling their business like selling a house, and they think that buyers want a move in ready, perfect house, right? Like when somebody's getting ready to sell their house, they put some fresh mulch and they plant flowers, they paint the wall, they fix the broken light switch. The thing is, when I'm buying a business, I want something with opportunity. I want something that when I look at, I'm like, wait, that business is making how much? Wow. If I go in and I fix this and I fix this and I fix this, I can make a lot of
Mhm.
extra money. And people often, they don't realize that. And they'll see the broken light switch and they're getting ready to sell their business. And, oh, I better go fix this real quick. But what they don't
Mhm.
realize is by fixing that broken light switch, let's say they make an extra 10 grand. But if they do it today to sell the business tomorrow, they've made 100 grand. Let's say they get a 3 times multiple. Then, or sorry, so they fix it, they get an extra 10 grand, they get a 3 times multiple, they made an extra $30,000 in value. Had they done that a year ago, it'd be 120,000 times three is 360,000 in value, right? So if I fix it today, I've removed opportunity that somebody may see, which means they might be willing to pay more for the business, but I haven't actually captured the value of the work I did. So when I talk to people about getting ready to sell a business, you want to think about this a year, 2 years, 3 years out. Do the things now that are going to, bring in that value and allow you to capture it. But if it's like, hey, I'm selling my business tomorrow, don't do a website redesign. You're spending money and you're not going to actually capture it. You're actually removing opportunity that somebody will see. It's always great to leave a little bit of opportunity for the next person who comes along.
Yeah. So
And then,
don't shine it up at the very last second.
yeah, no,
That that's great advice. And it makes me wonder, how early in the process do you get involved with people to help them plan for a year or two out?
yeah, I mean, like what you just said, uh, a year, 2, 3, 5 years. I meet people today that won't sell their business for another 5 years. And we believe in leading with value. So we're happy to talk to people who are free, take a look at their business and try to give them help with no expectation on our part of you coming
Mhm.
back. I mean, hopefully, obviously, when it's time to sell, you do come back. Um, but we're not going to hold you to that. We want entrepreneurs to understand what's going on and to make sure that they're maximizing the value of their business kind of from the start. One other thing we talked about with the 4 pillars is transferability and making sure that you've done things in such a way that the business can be transferred, right? If you are the face of the business, when you want to sell the business, are you going to go with the business? Or are you going to allow them to use your likeness moving forward? Like that's a real problem that we see sometimes where it's like, well, I don't want to give them my face to use in perpetuity and say whatever they want about me. Right. So,
Right.
you've got to think about that at the beginning and think about what that transferability might look like. If you're an inventor and the way you run your business is, I create a new product every 6 months and the products are, let's say, fidget spinners, right? Like that's an example. So hot products that make a bunch of money real quick and then fizzle out. So it's like, launch product, grow, fizzle out, launch product, grow, fizzle out, launch product, grow, fizzle out. Overall, you're growing. But
Mhm.
if you stop producing or inventing, all of those products fizzle out and go to zero. That's a very difficult business to sell, right? Because while you could transfer those things, they need somebody to continue making those new products each time. And if you're unwilling to go with them and keep ideating and coming up with new ideas, like what's the real value there?
Mhm. Good point. How about service businesses? I wondered about that because a lot of times that is the person,
Yeah.
unless whatever service they're offering is very transferable. What do those typically look like?
Yeah, so if you are the salesperson, if you are the guy or woman doing all of the work, it's not a sellable business, right? Like that's a job. And it's hard to sell somebody else a job that relies on you. So the
Mhm.
reality is you want to pull yourself out of the sales calls. You want to pull yourself out of actually doing the work and you want to manage the company and have people in place to actually do the tasks. It's very difficult. And we see this a lot with service-based businesses where it's like, yeah, they've got other people doing all the work, but the owner is on every sales call. Like a
Mm.
buyer coming in, they're not necessarily going to have that same skill set or believe that even if they are good salespeople, that they can just take over and run those sales calls and perform the way you're performing. So it's very difficult to sell a service business when the owner is in those kind of like really important day to day roles in the job.
That's such a huge tip because a lot of times our business, especially if it's service based, it's close to our heart and we put our blood, sweat, and tears and soul into it. So, but trying to detach, be more objective about it, whether it's service or whether it's our product, I think is an important point to make about reproduce you. Make sure whatever amount of your soul is going into this that you can hire other people or that that's reproducible so it can transfer.
Yeah. And, you know, I talk to people all the time, and some people, like, they don't want to sell their business ever, right? They've got a good thing. They like what they do. And like, there's nothing wrong with that, right? But just understand that by doing that, it is not going to be sellable. Or if it is sellable, you're going to take a major hit and not be able to get as much. There's
Mhm.
nothing wrong with being the person who does the sales calls. It's just, it hurts the value of the company. But,
Mhm.
there's plenty of people who make plenty of good money and really love what they do who are doing those things. So I want to make it clear there's nothing wrong with that. It's just from a perspective of wanting to sell your business, like, it makes it much more difficult.
Yeah. That, that's such a great point. I think while we're talking about selling your business, your product, your service, whatever it is, can you share a little bit about like some numbers? What is typical? What's a typical multiple? And I know there's a lot of variables there, but based on what you're seeing, can you give us kind of a range and what that typically looks like?
Yeah. So the obvious answer is it depends, right? Like,
Yeah,
I
for
hate to
sure.
say it, but it really does.
Yep.
We are currently not in the greatest market, right? The last 2 years have been a bit of a down market as far as sales go. And what's interesting is we're kind of seeing where, um, buyer expectations were really high, I'm sorry, seller expectations were really high and buyer expectations were really low. So there wasn't really a meeting of those two. So
Mm,
while transactions were happening, they weren't happening at the rate that we had seen back in like 2000, 2001. So we have started to see it pick back up, but for the last year I've actually been telling people, like, hold off and don't sell unless you really need to. If
mhm,
there's a reason and you want to sell, we're here, we'll help you, we'll get it sold. But I've been telling people to kind of wait, right? So kind of understanding that interest rates have gone up, so capital is more expensive to acquire businesses. We're in a down market. Multiples have come down from kind of the peaks that they were in 2021, 2020. Multiples changed regularly, right? If there's a big change at the SBA, multiples can go up or down. So we really need to look at kind of like where interest rates are and things like that. But in today's market, right, we're here in mid 2025, on most typical businesses that are sub, let's say, $1,000 in profit, you're probably looking at somewhere between a 2 and a 4 times multiple. So it's a big gap. There's a lot of things that depend, in there, right? Kind of looking at those 4 pillars. It's like, what's the transferability? What's the defensiveness? Are there patents? Are there trademarks? What is the moat around the business? How difficult would it be to just start a new one? People are constantly running in their mind the buy versus build. It's like, how much money would it cost me to rebuild this versus if I just buy it? So you
mhm,
have to kind of think of all those things. But like a standard decent business, kind of, let's just say it was 500,000 in profit, you're probably looking at a 3 and a quarter multiple. If it's SBA financeable, that actually opens up your buyer pool by like 10x. If you can have it be SBA financeable, you can actually go from where like you have buyers where you may not have been able to sell otherwise. I'll regularly get 8 to 10 offers on a business that's SBA financeable. On a non SBA business, I usually get maybe 4 on average,
mhm,
but the price is going to be a little bit lower. You may have to have like a small seller's note, kind of a lot in there. The price, though, changes as the profit grows, right? Once you get over $1 million in profit, it's when private equity starts rolling in. Once you get over 2 million, that's when more private equity rolls in. Once you get
mhm.
up to the 5 million, like, that's where, like, okay, now we're talking. It's that is where you see those like crazy multiples that are like 10 plus, is when you get up into that 5 million in profit range. Not 5 million in value, 5 million in profit, right?
Yeah.
But that all starts where the multiple starts to creep up, like at the 1 million in profit mark, 2 million, 5 million.
Yeah, important discrepancy, not just in sales volume, but in profit that you can document, show, and be able to share that.
You have to think about it from the perspective of the buyer, right? So when you
Mhm,
think about like private equity and large companies, if it's a big company, it takes a lot to move the needle for them. So buying a company that's making 500,000, it's not even worth their time because it doesn't change anything for them, right? But
Mm-hmm.
once you get up to where it's like 5 million changes most companies' bottom line, right?
Yeah, it's interesting with the SBA loans too, being kind of that preferred method for acquisitions, but I know requirements are tightening. What would you say for sellers? What would they need to know about preparing their business to qualify for SBA financing? What are some red flags that would turn off lenders or buyers, or what do they need to know about that?
Yeah, so it's not difficult, right? There's just a couple things that trip people up. One is it's got to be a US entity with a US. So like that's an important one. Your buyer also has to be US, right? And so meaning citizen, green card.
Hmm.
And there may be a couple other things. Some of the rules are recently changing. Used to be able to have like an investor from say Canada, but now I think it has to be 100% US owned.
Mm, okay.
You have to have clean books, right? So people get creative with their accounting and their tax returns.
Hmm.
The tax returns kind of need to match what the business is going to, saying it's doing. So if you said, if you're trying to sell the business and you can prove that it made 5 million in I shouldn't say 5 million because that wouldn't be SBA financial. If you could prove that it made 500,000, but then your tax returns show it made 100,000, it's not going to be SBA financeable. The
Mm,
banks are going to look at the tax returns to say, like, this is the holy grail of what everything should be. You need to make sure that you're not running too many personal expenses through it. We can do some add backs and things on some of that. But if it gets crazy, the bank's not going to touch it.
yeah.
You have to think about size, right? SBA is willing to loan up to 5 million on businesses. So once it gets too big, they're not going to work with you. Also, if it's too small, oftentimes it's hard to find a bank that wants to touch it. We see that's generally around 400, 500,000 in value. So if let's say it was a 3 times multiple, you have to be at like 125, $150,000 in profit to where
Hmm.
a bank's going to be willing to loan on it. Let me think about what else are some common pitfalls. Sometimes people will run multiple companies within the same entity.
Mm-hmm.
While it can be done still, you have to do what's called a consolidated financial statement where you show like profit from business A plus profit from business B plus profit from business C equals tax return. And it can get expensive to do that paperwork and it's not clean. So then banks are a little bit more standoffish about that. So I think, again, kind of the important factors are, have an entity for the business, run clean financials, make sure that you're documenting everything. Um, the business has to be stable or growing. It can't be falling off a cliff. And then what else? There was one more thing I was going to say. Um, I forget. So I think those are
Yeah.
the main things.
That's great. What about businesses that sort of seasonal or they have, peaks and valleys? Is it more about the pattern of all of that, or what does that typically look like?
Yeah, I mean, when we think about financing a business that has seasonality, there's different types of seasonality, right? There is Halloween, you're selling costumes. That is a difficult business to finance because
Hmm.
all your sales happen in like a 2 or 3 month period.
Hmm.
Versus, you're selling something that may be seasonal, like summertime, like sunscreen brand, right? They're selling year round, but really they do a lot of sales in the summer. Or a product that's like hot for Christmas and kind of the holiday season.
Hmm.
They're looking not at they're not looking at like November 1st, December versus January. They're looking at November 1st versus November of last year, December versus December last year, January versus January last year, right? You want to see an overall growth on month year over year, not, you know, month to the next month to the next month. It's okay for everybody's business falls off in January from, November, December because of the holiday season. And one of the other things I remember now, what I was going to say was that with the SBA, they're always looking at your tax returns. So
Hmm.
the optimal time for most businesses to sell through an SBA loan is actually at the beginning of the year, January, February, March, when they filed their new returns.
Hmm.
Because let's say you're growing at 50%. They always look to figure out how much they're going to be able to loan your company based on your tax returns. So if it's November and I've had 50% growth, it's
Hmm.
hard to capture that extra 50% you've grown over the course of that year because your tax return from the previous year anchors you to a lower number.
Got it.
So you have to, you on a high growth business, you want to sell towards the beginning of the year in order to not outgrow your tax return.
Great point. And these are all things that, I mean, how would the average person even know this unless they talk to you
Yeah.
and really had a strategy session? With that in mind, I mean, for founders that are, let's say, considering exiting in the next 1 to 2 years, can you share maybe some top actionable steps they should take today to really maximize the valuation, to really ensure a smooth transfer, successful sale? And I know we've touched on and gotten into a lot of this, but kind of overarching,
Yeah.
what are a few steps like people
Yeah.
can do now?
So I think it comes back to those four pillars, right? Risk, opportunity, transferability, and documentation, and thinking about how each of those apply to your business. So some things you could do are make sure that you have good SOPs in place, right? And some, maybe some tips for people if they're thinking about creating SOPs is use there's software called Loom where you can record your screen. Like when you're doing things, right, running your business,
Mhm.
record your screen as you're going through these processes, right? Build out a complete SOP to help make it transferable and have the documentation, right?
Mm.
Make sure that you are, you know, you're running clean books. Like stop putting all the stuff in there that's not business related, right? We can often add these things back through an add back section, but 50% of the profit or add backs, it just throws everything into question. So the cleaner
Mhm.
you can do it, the better it's going to be for selling your business. Again, don't spend a bunch of money fixing things a month, 2, 3 months right before you're going to sell. You're likely not going to capture the value. You've just spent a bunch of money. That's going to lower your profit. So if
Mhm.
there are things you think are going to move the needle, do them more than a year out. When we talk about the value of a company and a 3 multiple, right? It's 3 times trailing 12 months profit. Okay.
Mm.
So it's that
Okay.
trailing 12 months. And when you're looking at your bottom line P&L, so one of the things we do is we look and see like, hey, was there a dip in a certain month? Let's wait for that month to fall off the trailing 12 because if you were making $20,000 a month and there's one month where you made 10, and that if you in waiting a 2 months drops that 10 off and replaces it with a 20, right? It's not just the $10,000 delta, it's a 10 times the multiple, right? So you're making a lot more money and you're showing a better growth path.
Yeah.
What are some other things? You don't know what you don't know. So
Mhm.
talk to somebody, right? And it doesn't have to be me. It doesn't have to be Quietlight, but speak to somebody who's educated about it. Make sure they're not like self-serving and just going to tell you what they want to tell you to work with them, but tell you somebody who's got a reputation of being forthcoming, because that's the biggest thing. You don't know what you don't know. And we all, with even, my own businesses, right? Like, I have like tunnel vision on my business, and somebody else
Mhm.
may be able to come in and tell me like, hey, what about this? What about that? And really open your eyes to some things that you weren't aware of and help you maybe make more money or reduce the risk or, any of these things. But I think those are some of the important things.
That's great. Such good points. The SOP, the standard operating procedures, being able to hand off what you do, how you do it in a video format. Loom is great. We use that for our business as my daughter's been helping us with some of the marketing things, and we are training a new marketing person. And it's such a great tool to say, okay, this is how I do this and this is how I do that, so that it is more transferable.
Yeah, and that makes me think of one more thing. Is one of the things when people are selling a business, they often are selling it because like they just want to be out of the business. They want to be done with it, right? So the more the business relies on you, the more likely the purchaser is going to want to have you stick around for a little while to make sure that they're able to run it. So the more the things you can do to remove yourself from the business to make the business not rely on you, SOPs, employees, contractors, the better it's going to be, the more transferable it's going to be, right? So think about trying to make the business not reliant on you at all. That makes a very transferable business. It makes a valuable business.
Yeah. And I'm sure that's a huge concern for companies looking to buy businesses is how ingrained is this person? How do we sort of dissect the person from the business, and how sticky does that get or not? So that's a fantastic point. And I love that you are available to talk with people and have a little strategy session. And the word strategy, as you were talking, kept coming to mind about start early, get a good strategy. Don't try to slam it together at the last second. With that in mind, how can people get in touch with you? What's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, you can reach out to me just through my email. It's chuck@quietlight.com. You can visit our website. We've got like valuation forms you can go and fill out there and have somebody contact you. You can email inquiries at Quietlight and we'll, connect you with somebody. But yeah, just reach out. We don't charge any money for any of this stuff, right? We really do want to help people position themselves to be in the best, I hate to use the word again, position to sell their business for the maximum value. So we we are a lead with value company.
It comes through loud and clear. I mean, the fact that you'd spend 30 minutes or probably longer on the phone with somebody getting to know their business and hearing their story and offering some really helpful tips and hints and just strategizing with them. With Inventor's Edge, I do that as well. Set up a free call with somebody, talk them through that and try to give them. And it is about giving. And I think that comes through loud and clear with everything that you've shared and even coming onto our podcast and giving people some really good nuggets and some good takeaways.
Yeah, I appreciate that. We're all serial entrepreneurs. We love business. You can't stop me from giving people advice on their companies. It gets me in trouble a lot because sometimes people don't like all of the ideas. But
Yeah.
I just can't help myself but trying to help people with their businesses.
Yeah. Whether they like it or not. I mean, I do that as well. Sometimes it's a splash of cold water that they didn't want, but they really needed to hear it. And any final thoughts for Inventor's Edge listeners?
Yeah, I would just say again, make sure you're doing the things today that are going to pay off for tomorrow. Not even just for the exit, right? But like accrual financials, not cash if you have a physical product business. It makes all the difference in the world for just operating your actual business. Really, really important. I think that's the biggest piece of advice I can tell people with physical product businesses is make sure you're running your books on accrual.
Okay, great. Accrual, everybody. Pay attention to that. What about, do accountants normally like that? Do they lean
So
toward that, or do you have to nudge
yeah,
them a little bit to do that?
no. So I should probably say this every time I say this. There's taxes and then there's running your business, right? From the tax perspective, your accountant may want to do cash books for filing your taxes. It's
Mm,
different than operating your business, right? Operating your business, the difference between cash and accrual is if I buy $100,000 worth of inventory on cash financing or cash based accounting, that 100,000 goes into, let's say I bought the product in January. In January, it shows I have $100,000 of an expense on my P&L. I may have only sold $1,000 worth of product. So now it looks like I lost $99,000. On
mhm,
accrual accounting, it's, hey, I sold $1,000 worth of product and my cost of goods sold was 300. So it makes it
mhm,
look like I made $700 in profit, right? Which is accurate. Well, they're both kind of accurate, but the accrual is actually showing you for the amount of products I sold, what were my cost of goods, how much was my advertising, what was my true profit. And it makes your P&L look like this versus a P&L that is on cash. It goes like this because it's every
mhm,
time you buy inventory, it makes it look like you had a massive loss in profit. And then all of a sudden you have all these really high profits because you're not accounting for any of your expenses because
mhm,
you already prepaid those with the cost of goods. Hopefully, that can partially explain one of the reasons. Another major reason is as you have a growing business, you're going to buy more and more inventory. If you start the year with 100,000 in inventory, right, and let's say you buy 300,000 more inventory, you now have 400,000 in total inventory. But if you started at the beginning of the year with 100 and you end the year with 200,000 in inventory, that extra inventory from the start to the finish, there's a $100,000 delta there. That extra 100,000 on cash accounting will make it look like you lost 100 grand more than you really did. On
mhm.
accrual, it's just as if it was cash in the bank, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's another thing when you're selling your business on cash, on a growing business, it actually makes you look like you lost more money or you didn't make as much money. On accrual, it accurately represents what the business did, whether it's going up or down.
Great point. Thanks for breaking that down for us.
Hopefully it's hard to explain in words, like without graphs. So
Yeah, no, I had a good visual as you were talking, so that was helpful. And accrual basis, yeah, makes a lot of sense, especially for people looking to sell their business and get everything dialed in. So
but even not selling the business, just running your business, it
in
shows
general,
you whether you're actually making a profit or not.
yeah, great points. Really appreciate your time. Thanks for so much for coming on, Chuck. And we'll have your contact information in the notes. And until next time, we'd love to have you back on. Really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for everybody for watching. And please do reach out if you have questions.
Sounds great. Thanks so much, Chuck.
All right. Take it easy.
Bye-bye. Thanks for tuning in to the Inventor's Edge podcast. I'm your host, Scott Putnam, and if you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to like and subscribe, leave a review, and please share it with fellow inventors. Your next breakthrough could be just around the corner. For more tools, tips, and resources, visit us at inventors-edge.com. Until next time, invent with purpose, innovate with passion, and bring your ideas to life.